Welcome back. Korea this week celebrates Adoption Day, which was this past Wednesday. That would be May 11th. Now, in light of this occasion, I have two very special guests here in the studio. Director Yeon Wang-mo, who made the documentary, that is, a poignant story about an adoptee and his reunion with his birth mother 40 years later. Director Yeon, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
I also have the real-life protagonist of the documentary, LAYNE FOSTERVOLD, here in the studio. LAYNE, thank you very much for making the time to be here.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, Director Yeon, we'll start with you then. Let's begin with a few words then about your documentary, Mother Dearest. How would you summarize the story?
Let me tell you the logline of the movie. Before dying mother, her son appears after 40 years of separation, but he only speaks a foreign language.
Right, I see. So that's the short story then.
Yeah.
Director Yeon, what was the inspiration perhaps behind this documentary then?
I learned about LAYNE and his mother's story from an article on the US public radio, NPR, on the internet. And then I thought it has a potential to be something if I filmed the story for about 3 years. There were two crucial reasons for this decision. First, I wanted to observe how people who don't understand each other's language manage to live together and how the method of communication changes. Second, there was a very warm vibe between the two people. So it was like a sprout of love, I think. I wanted to see how it grows. So it is about a mother who is about to die and her son, and the language and love between them. I thought if I put these together, it will be a quite good story, I think.
Right. LAYNE, now, essentially, it is your story that is being shared in this particular documentary. Could you briefly walk us through your journey from Korea to the US and back to Korea again?
Okay, so my story begins when I was about 2 years old. My birth mother was forced to give me up for adoption. And so she dropped me off at Korean Social Services, which is one of the adoption agencies here. And then from there, I was sent to the US. I was adopted by a family in Minnesota. And I grew up there, and my adoptive family was great. They had a lot of love for me. I felt I could feel the love that they had for me, and my life there was good. But as when I was younger, I really didn't think about what reunion would be like, and I just wanted to fit in and be American. And actually, I had some resentment towards Korea for giving me up. And a lot of adoptees feel this way, that we feel like we've kind of been abandoned or discarded. And so for the longest time, I didn't want anything to do with Korea. And I had thoughts about my mother, and as I grew older, probably in my 30s is when I started to kind of start to forgive that part of it and then start to become curious. And so in 2012, I had seen there were a lot of reunion or tours to Korea that were sponsored by other companies, and so I decided to do a homeland tour through one of these companies. And when I finally decided to go, I didn't have any expectations. I just wanted to see Korea, and I wanted to see the orphanage that I was at. And because so much time had passed, I didn't think that it would be possible for me to even find my birth mother. The paperwork back then was very little, and there, a lot of it was, lost in fires and things like that. So I didn't have any expectations. But when I went to the Korean Social Services, they informed me that my birth mother had looked for me twice. So once in 1998 and then in 2001. And so, but they never told me about it.
Why?
So apparently there's a form that I would have had to sign to allow birth family contact. And so because I didn't know about that, I never signed this form. So it took me going to Korea to find this out. So part of me, when I found that out that information, I thought, wow, maybe I can. And then the other part was like, wow, that was like, 14 years ago. So I'm probably not going to ever find her. So about 2 years after I got back to the U.S., they messaged me saying that they had located my mother. And so I didn't have direct contact with her. I had contact with my sister. And so we decided, in 2016 is when we were going to meet for the first time. I had planned to stay here for about a month. And after, spending just a little bit of time with them, I realized that 1 month was not going to be long enough for me to actually get to know my family. So I had to make this decision where I have to give up my life in the U.S., my job, everything that I've known, and come back here to live, because I didn't know how much time we'd have together. And I just knew that this is something that I had to do. So that is how I ended up coming back to Korea and staying.
Right. And essentially, Layne, what motivated you to take part in this documentary, this particular project? I mean, your story, it's a deeply personal story, and I'm sure that you may have wanted to keep it private.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, I actually didn't think my mom would agree to it, because the podcast, one of my friends does a adopted podcast, and that's how we, that's how Wang-mo found us anyway. But she initially had like disagreed and did not want to do it. And so, this is just a 15-minute interview. So when she told me that there's a director that wanted to film us for like 3 years, I was like, there's no way my mom's going to agree to it. But Momo has a way of making my mom do things that I can't believe. So he convinced her to film this documentary, and I did want to show to my fellow adoptees, a lot of the adoptee stories out there are about the search only, and then it ends when they find the family. But there's not a lot of stories about what happens after that, and a length of time of 3 years of getting to know your mother or your family and overcoming all the hurdles that it takes to communicate and get to know each other again.
Right. A 3-year project, Director Yeon. It's amazing. Now, I hear that your documentary goes beyond the simple story of an adoptee and the reunion with his mother to shed light on perhaps the role of love, is it, in overcoming language barriers. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, the movie is about two people who are connected to each other into inseparable ties, basically mother and son. But they are foreigners to each other. Through this special situation, the audience can think about lots of things, something like their own mothers and so on, and their family, their mother tongue, and nationality. But most of all, through this movie, I think warmth is what matters the most. And the warmth is what we often call love, I think. Also, through this movie, we can recognize various aspects of language. The Korean language and English that we learn in school are necessary for systematic learning, like grammar. However, I personally believe that heart is more important than that, I think. So, if there is a sincerity and warmth, it can be delivered through our eyes, gestures, and smile. There are several scenes in the movie where there are some misunderstandings between the cast, but ironically, the misunderstandings are not obstacles. When the characters convey their feelings, whether they are kind of humor, funny, at the same time, we can think about the root of language we use.
Right. And Layne, what do you remember most about making this documentary?
The thing that I remember most about this documentary is when we took my Korean mother to meet my American mother in the U.S. I think they both thought about, what it could possibly be like, but they thought, that's probably never going to happen. And so I think there was a lot of profound feelings that came out from both of them, and a lot of healing that took place that they weren't even aware that they even needed. And so just seeing my two mothers interact with each other was just an experience that I'll just never forget. And it beyond what I could have even imagined possible. And to feel the love from both of my mothers and to know that they both love me just as much is just an amazing feeling and experience that I just couldn't believe was happening to me.
I'm sure you're blessed with two wonderful mothers. And while LAYNE has been blessed with two, Director Yeon, there have been a number of shocking stories here on the local front about children being adopted into abusive homes. What do you suppose are some ways of better addressing this really repulsive reality here?
First of all, it will be ideal if the biological parents could raise a child without sending the baby to adopt. To do so, social awareness should be improved and measures for support should be prepared so that the single mothers or poor families don't have serious problems as they raise children. Like this, we can reduce the number of adopted children as much as possible. And then I think the adoption system will have to be more organized. In fact, having children adopted is a matter of society and nation, I think. So the country should take responsibility for the post-adoption issue rather than simply tossing it to private organizations. In my opinion, we need to closely examine the environment of families and continue to follow up management so that we can find the problems quickly, even if abuse occurs, I think.
Right. And LAYNE, is there a message that you would like to share with adoptees and their families?
Yeah, to my fellow adoptees who are still searching, I know the tasks for looking for your birth family can seem daunting at times, but for me, I think that you just need to come to Korea and look, because when I was looking for my father's side, I only had part of a name and in a restaurant in Changwon, and that's it, nothing else. And this was over 40 years ago. So when we went down there and we spent many days down there just talking to the locals and asking people, I couldn't believe how many people still remember that restaurant from 40 years ago, and how many people just wanted to help us, and they were just so nice to us. And so I feel like a lot of people in these rural areas don't really go far away from, that area. So there are really good chances of you running into somebody who may have even known your family. So I feel like for those people still searching, you need to spend some time here and actually go to the cities that may be in your file. For the families, the Korean families that have given up children, one of the other reasons I agreed to this movie is that I was hoping that some of these Korean families who have relinquished children may reconsider coming forward, or some families don't want to meet their children that they've given away, but I hope this story will show them how good it can be and how healing it can be for both of us. And we are still your children, no matter if you were married at the time or single. We are still part of your family, and I have a half-sister that I love dearly, and I just couldn't imagine, not meeting all of my relatives and on both sides of my family. So if anything comes out of this movie, if one Korean family decides, you know what, I am going to come forward and try to find my child, that will make me more than happy. That will be a success for me.
Right, it would. And Director Yeon, before we end today, could you tell us a bit about your future plans, very briefly speaking?
So I want to make the language matter of film. So I wanted to film the artistic way of communication. So that's my next project.
Right, okay then, Director Yeon. Good luck with that. And LAYNE, thank you so much for being with us as well.
Sunny.
Thank you for having me.